Hey everyone, this is Yash from Academy of Mind. We also have Jonathan from our marketing team here today.
Hello, hello, hello. Today we're joined by Jeff Long, CEO and founder of True Focus Media. They specialize in video marketing, website development, and e-learning for industrial manufacturers. Now, Jeff helps industrial manufacturers create e-learning and training systems that decrease management's time onboarding, training, and more. He brings a lot to the table when it comes to e-learning and marketing, and he's done some great stuff in the industry. We are really excited that Jeff is here with us today and for this conversation. So, Jeff, why don't you kick it off and take it from there?
Yeah, thanks, guys. I really appreciate you having me on your show. This is kind of an honor to tell my story and try to give as much helpful tips and resources and strategies as I can. So, just a little bit about me. I mean, I started my company in 2003, and education has always been at the, I would say, foundation of my company. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is both my parents are educators. They've been teachers all their life. My brother was a teacher, my grandpa was a teacher, and got some preachers mixed in there as well. And so I consider myself, even though I do marketing, it's with a foundation of education. And then e-learning is also a part of kind of the services I provide. So again, thanks for having me on here today.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure.
So Jeff, just to kind of get into some of the questions that we had for you based on your expertise and experience, why are industries like, say, manufacturing, I know you work very closely with them, obviously, ideal for, using e-learning, especially for their employees or customers or partners in general?
Yeah, I think some of the reasons why manufacturing, there's so many opportunities for e-learning, and I try to preach this all the time, whether I'm doing webinars or live speaking or podcasts like this, is manufacturing, there's a lot at stake here, right? Like you're building some heavy stuff, some expensive stuff, and if somebody gets hurt or if the product gets damaged, that's a lot of money, not to mention the people involved, right? That's the most important thing. So, there's, from an employee standpoint, there's new hires, there's safety as you're assembling, or, we do some video with Stober drives in Kentucky, and we always have to wear, steel-toed shoes and other safety precautions, because if we drop their products on our feet, we're probably not going to walk for several months or longer.
Right.
And so, then there's common issues that a customer could have, right? So there's also customer training, whether it's install or setup or safety or cleaning or upkeep or all of those things. So again, I really think manufacturing has tremendous opportunities for training, for e-learning, and I know we'll talk about those more here.
Sure, absolutely. So you kind of already began to answer some of what I was thinking of. You mentioned customers, of course, internal training. So for the manufacturers that you work with, what are some of the departments that you're typically working with?
Yeah, great question. So obviously HR on the e-learning side is at the top, right? Because there's new hires, there's ongoing training or safety or certifications. There's a myriad of different training opportunities. And a lot of times they're doing those one-on-one or always in person. And so there's obviously tremendous opportunities for capturing that training, putting it on an e-learning platform like Academy of Mind and right, being more efficient and effective. So yeah, HR is like the big one. But even like the sales department, whenever I talk with the sales managers, I always say, okay, we're not trying to replace the salespeople here, but what types of videos or training or e-learning could we create that will help your salespeople be more effective? Yeah. So, they could create FAQs or even proprietary training systems, right? That maybe we don't want to blast this all over the internet, but we put it on an e-learning platform so that the salespeople can send it to their prospects, and maybe each prospect has their own login, or maybe not. It depends. And that prospect can maybe walk through some of the training so that when the salesperson does do that call or demo, the prospect already has more information at their fingertips. So those are kind of the top two. Oh, one more here, and then we can kind of talk about them, is customer service, right? So, we've done trainings where because of the videos and the training materials we created, it cut down on those customer service calls immensely. And it kind of automated some of the typical customer service calls that were coming in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. One thing that we notice when we work with a lot of clients, especially in these types of industries, that have been out there for many years, right? Hundreds of years, like manufacturing, obviously, as an example in this case. And how do they adapt, or how have they been kind of like adapting to the changing times with, technology? And because we do see a lot of resistance sometimes to change. It's not easy, right? So how are, like, in your experience so far, like, what do you see or some of the challenges with customers, especially in this space, in terms of adapting to new technology? Maybe it's e-learning or LMSs, or in general, because we see that a lot. It's not always easy to kind of go from in-person to online, especially since COVID, right? So we've seen a lot of customers struggling with that. So what are your thoughts or experience with that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think with all that, there's a lot of opportunities, right? So if we're talking about, let's just say, new hire training, there's obviously a labor shortage. So any company that can optimize, automate, streamline any processes, but let's talk about new hire training. If you can automate some of that new hire training, make it more efficient, effective, have quizzes and tests, and then it's kind of like manually graded, and then the HR manager can kind of see those, or have an automated report. There's a lot that can be done to help you stand out from your competition. But I think a lot of the barriers, like you asked, Yash, is some of it's awareness. I think even though for you and me and in our audience that we know, e-learning and LMSs, and we know some of the terms, but some people, don't know what's out there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And sometimes I think it's technology overwhelm or hesitancy, right? They think technology equals I've got to learn a confusing software, and you guys have made it easy, and so that reduces that kind of hurdle, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I just wanted to add to that. I talk to customers, and sometimes they will say, we don't sometimes know what to search for. Like, they don't even know the term LMS, even though we assume a lot of people, of course, do. So especially in these types of industry that are still kind of, trying to break into the new model of teaching and learning, where, it is important for them, but yeah, they do struggle with that. So that's an interesting point.
Yeah. And I think for better or for worse, COVID exploded some expectations out of the water, right? So it used to be, hey, we have to do in-person training, or before I started this marketing agency, I did corporate training with Lowe's. And so anytime there was a new store open across the USA or Canada, I would fly in, do training and things like that. It's been almost 20 some years since I did that, but I would imagine a lot of that is done online these days.
Right.
And so I think, I think people have been forced into different training situations where they can't do it in person. But I think I still talk with training managers, and they still think it 100% has to be done in person. And I always tell them, hey, I don't think we should do 100% online. Like, I think there's a mix, right? But a lot of them are still hesitant to do any online or any, with an LMS.
Yeah, we see that a lot too.
Interesting. So I guess for a client like that, that's very hesitant and is, insists that 100% in person is the way to go, how would you, because obviously you're not going to convince them at that point that we're going to go 100% self-paced modules, not even, webinars and stuff. So how have you worked through that to sort of, convince a manufacturer that we can go with a hybrid model, it's more efficient, it's more cost saving? What are some of the steps and thoughts you have on that?
Yeah, great question. So a couple things I would ask are, is there any training where it has to be really precise, right? And so sometimes that means like the training person is like almost reading from the manual, right? They're reading from the workbook. Okay, if that has to be precise, to me that's an opportunity to record that on video, have other supplemental materials, put it on an LMS, and let the employee or whoever go through that, because it has to be very precise. So that's
Right.
one opportunity. Another, I look for like, what's your highest risk? Again, so if it's a safety training, I mean, what if that HR manager forgets to talk about a certain topic, and the employee goes out and they're working on the line and they drop something or whatever, and something
good point.
breaks. Like, there's liability there, right? So that's another aspect I look for, is like, hey, we want to make everybody go through the same training, and obviously e-learning is the best way to do that. So those are some of the few that I talk about. And then another one I bring up occasionally is like, if they're doing a lot of training, typically they don't like it, or there's certain modules or topics that they hate. So I'm like, I mean, if you could like wave a magic wand and stop doing this type of training or these modules, like, what would that mean? And sometimes their eyes light up. Oh, if I could reduce 20% of my training, imagine what I could do here. I could be more effective and efficient in this way. So those are some opportunities that I try to dig up.
Yeah. Jeff, like, I was thinking about this, like, what are some of the like top 3 or 4 things you ask a customer when you onboard them, like, especially from a marketing perspective, to help them with this, obviously e-learning as well, but what are some of the top 3 or 4 things that you ask them or assess, based on what their needs are?
That's a great question. So, like you said in my intro there, my agency does kind of 3 things, or 3 pillars, right? So video marketing is one of those. So that can mean a lot of things. We have a strategy we're doing called video value bombs, right? It's a content marketing piece. But we've done high-end, corporate videos, training videos, of course. And then web design and development is kind of the second pillar. And then the third pillar, what we're talking about, is e-learning. So, Yash, to be honest, it's a lot of asking questions, kind of open-ended questions, and listening. And finding out those pain points and seeing, okay, is this something that me and my company can handle, can help them with? Is there somebody else I can refer them to? Or are we just not a good fit? So with e-learning, it is, if I'm talking with HR or some of their marketing or salespeople, I do try to listen for, like, if they seem annoyed or bothered, or if training seems cumbersome, then I start talking about that. Another thing, I just thought of this. I worked with an OSHA training company years ago, and they were working with a proprietary locked LMS, crazy high price, limited functionality, kind of the old model. And I just heard the pain points of like, oh, Jeff, we're spending all this time trying to figure stuff out. It's not going right. And so I talked with the training manager, and I said, okay, if we could do a different LMS and a different platform and all that stuff, and save you, 25% of your time and your staff's time, like in real dollars and time, what would that save you? And it was kind of an easy calculation. And so they ditched the huge, outdated, 6-figure or whatever it was LMS, and went with something more easy.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, because we see that a lot too, like when we work with customers who had an LMS for many years, especially, some of the incumbents way back from, say, mid 2000s even. And back then, what used to cost $100,000 now is like a fraction. A lot of LMS companies, not just us, of course, but I think that's really important. A lot of customers are not aware of that. And, again, change is hard, so people just stick to what they have. But I think that's where people like you come in and help them explore, and of course us too, obviously. But, it's good to have, I think the knowledge and sharing is really the key for these industries right now, how things are changing. So, and that's what we're also trying to do, like create more knowledge for our customers, not just trying to sell, but really help them understand what's out there, what are their options. And, that's where I think they can really get a better idea of, because a lot of people think they don't have options, so or are not aware yet, so.
Well, I've been impressed with a lot of your articles are really in depth, and they give a lot of information, and it's not like this sales piece, like, hey, buy our, buy it from us or whatever. It's more informational, talks about pros and cons, and it shows that you guys are those experts in the field.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's with the blogs, that's our goal, right? We're not trying to hard sell you and get you to buy our LMS. In fact, some of the articles we put out are very just solely resource pieces, because we know a lot of these customers may be just starting out their e-learning journey, where they may not even really know what a learning management system is, but they may need one. Some customers, even that have had an LMS or a system and have been exposed to e-learning for a long time, there's still a lot of gray area, and there's still a lot of unknown, because the industry's constantly changing and evolving.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Jeff, what do you think is like in the next 3 to 5 years, how will this industry, especially, the ones that we're talking about, manufacturing, obviously, safety training you mentioned, we do have a lot of clients doing that, and it's really interesting space. And there's a lot of, still, like I said, resistance or not being able to change. Where do you see this going in the next 3 to 5 years, in your opinion,
Yeah, I think a couple things. The term just-in-time learning, is a phrase we might be familiar with. I've seen even some manufacturers that enable their employees so that if they see something go wrong or whatever on the line or in the office or whatever, they can actually take out their phone, record a short video, and send it to either the training manager or somebody, or they have like an approval process. So I think some of this like just-in-time learning or training, or maybe employees are asking questions, so that it's not I don't think training or education should be like, hey, we did it 5 years ago, we're good, let's kick back. Like, it should be an ongoing thing, right? There's always new challenges and opportunities. And so the faster you can train your employees and your customers and do it more efficiently, there's opportunities to make more money, because everybody's learning and growing and doing it in a more efficient way. And so that's one thing. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, definitely. I mean, the lifelong learning doesn't just apply to personal lives. It applies to your employees and your customers and partners. If we're talking about safety training, if you can empower them with the knowledge to be safe on the job in a more efficient way that costs less, I mean, I think most organizations would take that up.
Yeah.
Yep. So I know, Jeff, you've been doing the video marketing for a very, very long time. So what are some of and I know you've been focused on manufacturing, that's you're sort of all in on that. What are some of the industries you have worked with in the past? Because I know you mentioned Lowe's. I know you mentioned you worked with a company using like an OSHA LMS, like a very locked in system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everything we've talked about here today is not industry specific to manufacturers, right? Like, everything could be in pretty much any industry. That's the beauty of it, and that's the beauty of your software is it's not just for manufacturers, but many other industries. So yeah, I've worked with like a pizza franchise that had I don't know how many dozens of franchises across the U.S., and so we did a series of training videos for their new hires. That was kind of a lot of fun, just to see pizza and then eat pizza for lunch.
Sure.
Did some work with a medical training company. So they were doing a lot of in-person training, and so we recorded some of their seminars and courses and lessons and got that up online, and was able to create a additional revenue stream for them, because again, they were just in person. And then I've worked with different software companies like eSpark, or I've worked with like the Ohio Department of Education. So yeah, kind of like I said at the beginning, I find that education is kind of the foundation of who I am and the services I provide, partly because my parents are both teachers, but I really value it in any industry.
Sure.
And so, I always kind of keep my eyes and ears open and try to talk about e-learning as much as I can, because there's tremendous value for everybody involved.
Absolutely. It's interesting too, you mentioned that you were working, I think you said a medical, at one point you were working with a medical company, and you were turning webinars into training courses that people could access on demand afterwards.
Yeah.
And I think even some companies, they want to do this, or they have this idea to maybe, sell a course. They offer a webinar and then they turn it into a course and sell it online to customers. but they're not really sure how. So it's interesting you brought that up.
Yeah, and I think with all of this, like, the more there's a built-in audience, the better, right? So, we all know people that kind of talk about, hey, make a course and make $1 million or whatever, and it's like, it's not really about that. And so, there's tremendous opportunities. Even, it's so funny. I forgot about this until now. I was with my chiropractor years ago, telling her a little bit about e-learning and some of the stuff I was doing. And she was like, oh, you know what? Like, she's kind of well-known in her space. It's like, I mean, you have this training you're already doing with other local chiropractors. What if you package that together and, put that online? And so I don't know if she ever did anything about it, but there's opportunities all over. I think with businesses that are, sizable, obviously it's built in, right? They have customers, they have employees. They just need to make it happen. They just need to put the training, in a way that they can replicate it easily.
Yeah. And I talk to a lot of customers, obviously, and as one of the things that we come across is the initial, like that inertia that they need, right? How do we get started? Like if they're a bit early and they have maybe some materials they have written down, or maybe they're only doing, virtual, like live webinars or maybe in person, one of the biggest challenges they face is how do I get from there to maybe, putting something in a system, making it on demand. And I think that's where a lot of knowledge also like needs to be, kind of shared and help, talk to customers about that stuff. So, because that's a big challenge. We see a lot of clients who are starting out and they are not sometimes able to get beyond that stage. And it takes them months, sometimes years, and I think customers who are able to do that are the ones that then can get to the next stage where they can get a system in place, whether it's an LMS or something, to kind of get that engine running for, online learning. And that's one of the challenges, biggest challenges they face. So
I'm curious, I'll turn the tables here. How do you either help companies, advise, like what, because I've worked with companies that was the biggest barrier to entry. Like we all knew what we were going to do, who we were going to, film and how the course, materials are going to put together. But when they looked at the time investment, they just couldn't get through that. So any recommendations for me or the audience there?
I think it's really comes down to, I guess, the priority and the objectives, right? So I would say that, it comes down to the return on investment, and those types of discussions need to happen because frankly, it's a very difficult thing to do. And, we've, like I said, to be honest, like sometimes clients just are able to get to that stage. They think about it. It takes a year or so before they kind of come back to it. I think the best way to start is to be incremental. Have a couple of things in place. Don't go with a big bang approach. Come up with a objective for the short term and say where do you want to be in this like 3 to 6 months from now. Work on that strategy. Maybe you have 1-2 videos that you can record. Because a lot of times customers are very ambitious and it's a human nature, right? We want to go big. And then it doesn't take you anywhere because it's so much work to kind of start. That initial momentum is the key. And so my advice to clients is that start small, obviously with the bigger picture in mind, but it's okay. Maybe you have one Word document, a PowerPoint, get something together. And of course, companies like us, or even you guys can help them kind of shape it into a format that can be better for, let's say, online learning. For example, if they have like a 1-hour video they recorded, it's okay. It's not end of the world. Just we recommend that, okay, now we can help you split that, or talk to someone who can help you split that into smaller chunks, and it's more engaging and things like that. And that's where I think consultative approach is really the key to, we don't think of our customers as just customers. We actually think of them as partners, advisors really to them. And that really works because even in your business, I'm sure when a customer can trust you that you will give them the right advice, then they stick with you longer, obviously, right? It's the nature of business, but in general, that's our recommendation. But it's not always easy. I mean, there's some work to be put in from all sides. So
yeah, that's really good.
So I guess the last thing that I'm thinking of, I mean, we could talk forever. There's so much to talk about in this space. But I think already this conversation is gonna help a lot of people because when you Google LMS or start looking into e-learning and start training as a company, there's just so many rabbit holes and avenues. And like Yash said, it's best to just start incremental. You could start with a PowerPoint or a Google Doc and just get things going. But typically with, I guess the industrial manufacturers that you're working with, is there, a specific type of training that comes over and over again? Is it usually like an accredited safety thing where it's required from OSHA, or is it more like, is a lot of what you're doing sort of HR practices and recommended stuff, or cultural, they're trying to, train cultural stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. The stuff that I've done typically is more company driven versus regulation or accreditation driven. Not to say, there is both. For whatever reason, I've probably done more of the just working with a company for their existing training and doing it that way. But
Sure.
Like I said, I've worked with an OSHA training company. They had, I think they were in 7, maybe 9 states type of thing, and so we built this robust platform from the ground up. And you can imagine all the red tape, with OSHA and the government,
Absolutely.
things. It was intense. And so, but yeah, it's more inward rules and regs versus outward.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Like, we have clients, I know at least some couple of clients I can think of top of, like, they're doing like things like forklift training or like hazmat and those types of things. It's really interesting space. I personally learned so much about the whole industry, because when you go to a construction site, you see the hard hats and all that stuff. But then, now I know how much goes like behind the scenes, right? How much work. And obviously, we all know safety and security is big in those industries, but the challenges that they face, it's incredible. So yeah.
And one of the challenges with manufacturers, as well as I'm sure other industries, a lot of times manufacturers, it's not like they're selling to you and me, right? Like, they're selling to big companies. So they're making the product, they're selling it to Home Depot or whoever, Ford or whatever company. So there's opportunities for even like white label training where, let's say I'm the manufacturing company and I sell it to 10 different distributors who resell it. I have a webinar I do, and one of the kind of tips or strategies is like, hey, could you create a white labeled version of that training for each of your maybe top 10%
Customers.
distributors or whoever, maybe you can't do it for everybody. So there's opportunities there. There's even opportunities for companies that are the industry leader or want to be, and they could create specific training that will kind of showcase their expertise and then license it to other manufacturers or other companies or organizations or anything like that. So to me, there's a lot of exciting opportunities, almost endless.
Yeah, like the B2B training is pretty big these days. We have some customers that already use that, and actually our platform offers that as well. So it's really interesting that you mentioned that. Yeah, like, because it's, one thing to sell to or work with individuals for training, and then, a lot of times they have these corporate deals or, deals with organizations, and they want to kind of onboard them in bulk. And that's been a pretty big, request as well, from a lot of organizations. So certainly it's really important right now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Help them scale. Okay, awesome. Great, Jeff. I think I'm good with my questions. I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, that was some home runs. There's a lot of helpful stuff.
Yeah. Well,
great conversation.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I again appreciate you having me on. I love talking about training and the opportunities that there are for companies to be more effective and more efficient. And obviously, e-learning and online training is at the forefront of that.
Absolutely. And once again, for the audience, if you're watching this, we're talking to Jeff Long today, the CEO and founder of True Focus Media. And they do a lot of video marketing, website development, especially in e-learning industries. And if you need any help with video marketing or website development in your space, feel free to talk to Jeff. He's a great guy. So thanks for everything, Jeff.
Thanks.
Thanks.